What is it about what they know? Because I'm assuming, you could talk about this too, that our government is, you probably believe that they are actually in contact, maybe even communicating with these ETs. And so what's the end game for them? Why are they trying to hide it if these things are actually happening?
Well, first and foremost, because of the technology.
Okay.
You know, there is a legitimate there. Let's be honest. There is a legitimate national security concern here.
Because people freak out? Because
we don't want to share the kind of technology that we've been able to derive from crash retrievals. We don't want to share that technology with Russia or China.
Okay.
We need to maintain a tactical advantage in regard to this technology. I get that. I think that's important as an American citizen. I would rather that the United States government be in possession of this technology than China, let's say. So I understand that aspect of it. And that's, that might be the only reasonable excuse for keeping some of this secret. Outside of that, we run into some very nefarious stuff, including the fact that, we have been, we're concealing technology, for example, that would totally transform human society, could eliminate poverty. We're talking about free energy. So there's moneyed interests involved here that wouldn't want this kind of technology available to the public, which is, of course, nefarious. I mean, it would instantly catalyze the betterment of human civilization, especially in third world countries. So to me, that's part of the equation. But also, there's a lot of skeletons in this closet. When you talk about the decades long program that's been going on, the crash retrieval programs and cover up of the alien presence and of the whole UFO phenomenon, to put it in no uncertain terms, the government has killed people to keep this secret, more than a few, and has ruined people's lives to keep this thing a secret. The government is covering up, and when I say the government, that I don't like that term. We talk about the deep state, and the deep state is this entrenched bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., involving the intelligence communities, involving the FBI, the CIA, involving, just the bureaucratic machine that never changes in Washington. You can change out the faces, the politicians, but you never change these individuals. They don't go anywhere. These are the real power players behind the scenes. In the military, there are certain generals who are so entrenched, especially the ones who are dealing with these special access programs. That's the deep state. But I think there's an even deeper deep state. I call it the dumb state. And it's sort of tongue in cheek. But dumb, of course, is the acronym for deep underground military bases. And that's where a lot of these special access programs are being developed, is in these deep underground military bases. And that's where some of the most nefarious things are taking place. And so I call it the dumb state. It's deeper than the deep state. It's the dumb state. And I believe that the skeletons in the closet in regard to the dumb state are I think if people knew what's been going on behind the scenes, they would be absolutely appalled to discover. For one thing, aside from the fact that they're hiding potentially beneficial technology from the rest of human society, they've been covering up the abduction phenomenon for decades. And the abduction phenomenon directly relates to American citizens. And the primary function of the United States government, especially the military and the intelligence communities, is to protect the American people, ostensibly, right? Although they haven't really been doing that great of a job. But that's one of the primary functions of government. And the subject of alien abductions reveals that not only has the government not only been protecting American citizens, but the government itself, and again, let's be more specific, the dumb state has been, to some extent, complicit in the abduction phenomenon, in that they have not told us, they've not warned us about this threat, about this ongoing phenomenon in which hundreds of thousands of Americans are involved involuntarily. In other words, the Greys are using the wombs of our females to incubate their human hybrid clones.
You got to understand, my audience and your audience, I don't know how much overlap there is. So what you just said was absolutely fascinating and terrifying. Just pretend like this is a 101 class. Hundreds of thousands of Americans have been abducted, and they're placing clones within their wombs, and these terrestrial celestial beings are walking amongst us.
Well, yeah. So this, and this is, again, this is one of the nefarious things. This is one of the skeletons in the closet that certainly the Pentagon does not want to talk about, is alien abductions, because they're directly implicit in the cover-up. They haven't done anything to protect the American people from it. They certainly haven't told us about it. And I think that I actually believe in the Eisenhower agreement that was struck between the Eisenhower administration and gray aliens. As crazy as that sounds, there's a lot of good ufologists, the best ufologists, in fact, who believe that story is true because of all of the corroborating evidence surrounding that crazy story. And so, if it is indeed true that elements of the government have struck a deal, we get technology, we permit you to abduct our citizens, that's treasonous against the American people.
Man.
So circling back around to the abduction phenomenon itself, when you talk about alien abductions, this is an area of inquiry. This is an area of research in ufology that lends itself to scientific inquiry, because it is a body of evidence. The abduction phenomenon there's a body of evidence, definitive evidence, that this phenomenon is real, it's physical, and every kind of evidence, every kind of proof that you would bring to bear in a court of law to prove a case, you can find within the abduction phenomenon and within the research that's been done over the decades by highly competent researchers. Some of the best ufologists, such as in the beginning, it was John Mack sort of cracked the lid on this thing. The Harvard psychologist John Mack, who I believe was killed. Then you have the late Carla Turner, you have Bud Hopkins, and you have David Jacobs. Those are the individuals. And of course, David Jacobs he's retired now, but he was a professor of history at Temple University. Dr. Carla Turner was a highly credentialed university professor. Bud Hopkins was a phenomenal field investigator. If you read any of Bud Hopkins' work, very intelligent man, just a great, old school field investigator. And of course, John Mack, who was the professor of I believe he was psychology, the professor of psychology at Harvard.
Jeez.
And so you have this body of evidence that's been compiled primarily by them, but there's been some others of the mix as well, other highly competent researchers. And this body of evidence that they've been able to compile is conclusive. And most of this work was done 70s, 80s, 90s. It's conclusive. Alien abductions are a physical phenomenon. People are physically taken from whatever environment they happen to be in during an abduction episode. Many times it's a bedroom. Sometimes they're laying on the couch. Sometimes they're camping. They're in a camper in the woods. Sometimes they're driving their cars. Actually, quite often they're abducted as they're driving a car down the road at nighttime. They're taken by, usually in almost every case, by the little gray aliens. They're brought on board an alien craft, and they're subjected to not experiments. They're subjected to a very methodical, systematic procedure that is related to the production of human alien hybrids. Sperm is extracted from the males and other genetic material, and women have, let's say, gynecological procedures performed on them And oftentimes, women have they have these zygotes implanted into their wombs, which grow into fetuses, which are extracted around the 3-month period before they begin to show. And so in a subsequent abduction, they're abducted again, and then the fetuses, the hybrid fetuses are extracted, and they finish their development in gestation tanks until they're, and when they're toddlers, by the way, these women interact with their hybrid offspring. And it's very complicated phenomenon, but unfortunately it's very real. And so that is, circling all the way back to the hearings, that is one of the topics that I can guarantee you that the Pentagon does not want
my goodness.
brought up.
So, one of the men I respect more than anybody else on this planet, he's gone to be with the Lord now, was Dr. Chuck Missler.
Yes.
And I was on several programs with him, and I had the opportunity to have dinner with him several different times. And he was the first person that I had ever heard even discuss this matter. And I remember one point that he said to me is that so many of these women do not appear to be attention seeking. The vast majority of them have zero psychiatric history. They're not looking for the spotlight. It's just a fact of the matter that they're discussing what took place with them.